Hello, everybody. My name is Menelik Washington from the Dope Connection, CEO and co-founder. And rather than, do these two pioneers the disservice of, trying to, failing to list all of their accomplishments and the importance that they have to this space, I hope that they have a chance to, introduce themselves and where they're coming from, and then we can get into this Q&A and gather up some questions in the meantime. So, gentlemen, if you would.
Oh, well, I'll step in. Hey, look, I'm Fred Brathwaite, also known as Fab Five Freddy, filmmaker, artist. And I guess you guys might have had just got to look at Grass is Greener. And if you did, cannabis, and of course, Steve over here, who's a giant and a legend I met as a result of my film. And it's great to be working with him. So, Steve.
Well, okay, but what about the first part? How did you get that name? It's a pretty outrageous name, brother. How'd you get that name?
Who, me?
Yes, you.
Oh, it's a street thing, a New York street graffiti, hip hop, you know. Uh,
Well, I'll jump in then and let folks know that Fab Five Freddy was the person who really introduced hip hop to at least to mainstream America when he was the first VJ on Yo MTV. Am I saying that right?
you're absolutely right. Thank you so much.
All right. So, and I think that that's critical to the story that we're telling here when we're talking about the legacy community. Because one of the things that legacy has, and one of the things that informs legacy, is the fact that we have had enough years, enough decades with this plant, so that our cultures have been informed by the lessons that the plant teaches us. And hip hop is one of the main manifestations of that culture. So I think the role that hip hop played in the cannabis story and the role that you, my brother Fred, played in the hip hop story are all really important parts of this little thread that we're going to weave together today.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate that. And really, like this has been a part of my whole life. Um, this musical, cultural thing, cannabis, and yeah, it's just incredible how a harmless plant that's killed no one has been so brutally persecuted for so long. It's great that we're able to go begin a process of re-educating so many people and exposing people to the truth. But music has been a big help, and so Grass is Greener was inspired by that idea, as well as just giving you the truth um, with some flavor. Telling that story that may not have been told in that particular way, but it also opened my eyes greatly because there were things that I didn't even know that were going on right here in New York. So I'm happy to say that we've got some legislation and an opportunity now to try to do the right thing and making sure those people that laid the foundation on the legacy tip, make sure that they get a piece of this pie.
Yeah. And actually, speaking of doing the right thing, one thing that I used to do all the time in a past job was whenever we started something, I like to share something positive that we may have done recently, and just in the spirit of positivity and building. Is there anything that you guys have going on that you might want to tell people is either down the pipeline or may have just happened, or just something to share with the community as an uplifting moment?
I've
Well,
got a great one. Our brother Umberto Ramirez, who is currently locked up in a New Jersey prison, has just been granted parole. He is no longer going to be locked up. We expect him to be free and back into the arms of his wife, Roxanne, and his children within about 30 days. So another one of our family who never should have been locked up is finally coming home, and we need to celebrate each and every one of those wins, even as our sister Brittany Griner is in this terrible situation, not getting the kind of support from the U.S. government that she should have gotten. Maybe that's beginning to change a little bit now. We still have plenty of distance to go, but every win counts. And so Umberto is going to be coming home, and that made me happy today.
Wow.
Yes, yes.
And, that just makes me think, inspired by what I learned in the making of the film Grass is Greener, I created a cannabis business along with a gentleman that was featured in my film, Bernard Noble. We call the brand B Noble, who was given a 13-year sentence for two joints worth of cannabis. Think looking at what Brittany Griner is going through, it kind of is, which is so tragic and horrific. But people are going through similar things here in America for a very long time. Bernard Noble was given 13-year sentence, hard labor, for two joints worth of cannabis. And I'm sure Brittany's that amount of oil in her vape was, so that nonsense is still going on, and it just throws light on the fact that how much stronger would the case be, although Britain should not be in that situation whatsoever, but how much stronger would it be if Biden and like Kamala had done the right thing, in terms of the MORE Act and safe banking and things that we're still fighting against here. And as you know,
Yeah.
people are still in prison. So it's just really crazy. And that has made me think of that, a lot. I'm sure Steve as well, watching that, we haven't been on the front lines for so long. It just is a glaring, people in certain states are dealing with the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, even worse. Right now, one of the cases that the Last Prisoner Project is highlighting is the case of Kevin Allen. Kevin is in Angola prison, a former slave plantation where something north of 80% of the prisoners never make it out alive. He's there for possession of $20 worth of cannabis, right? Probably a little bit less than what Brittany had. And he's in the United States, and he's doing life without parole. So it's fine for Biden to get up and beat his chest and get high and mighty over Brittany. And I want him to get high and mighty over Brittany. I want him to go over there and get her out. And then I want him to go down to Louisiana. I want him to get Kevin Allen out. And before he does any one of those things, he could sign an executive order releasing every single federal cannabis prisoner, just like he promised to do, not once, not twice, but 3 times nationally televised. The man made a promise that he's not keeping.
Yeah, that's 100% true. And so, in that vein, that I sort of have two ways that I think we could go with this, and one is how can we really support the people who have been unjustly harassed by this prohibition and who continue to sort of have to live in that pathway, but then also how how can we ease the transition from legacy to legal, particularly when we see, like highlighted in the documentary, these people at conferences who are in positions of power, who are set up to, be movers and shakers in the industry. And they just have this stigma of, oh, you operated legacy, you're a criminal. You don't know what you're doing. You're a pothead. You're not a business person, regardless of what your infrastructure, what your work ethic, what your network, what your real business look like. So I'm not sure which way y'all want to take that, but I just feel it's super relevant.
Well, let me just, take it through my lens of what happened in California. And right around the time that California happened in 2018, Canada also happened. They're kind of woven together. So, from 2006 until 2018, I ran a dispensary called Harborside in Oakland, California. It was a nonprofit dispensary. We were supplied by 500 small independent growers. We served 350,000 medical cannabis patients. Those patients got the best weed in the world at affordable prices. Our employees had the best job that they'd ever had. None of us were getting rich, but all of those growers were able to buy their houses and send their kids to school. We were all taken care of. That changed in 2018. In 2018, the for-profit, big corporations, Canadian money came into California. And the day before the new regulations took effect, I had, as I said, 500 small independent growers who were supplying me. The next day, I had 10. Only 10 of those growers were able to make it into the regulated system. So the state created a situation where the only people who could survive, the only people who could meet their crazy requirements were people who had millions and millions of dollars. And right around the same time, coincidence, the Canadian public stock markets open up to cannabis companies, and they start pumping millions, hundreds of millions of dollars into California, right? Well, during the years when Legacy was running the show, because, when we started in 2006, there was nothing but Legacy. You didn't have MSOs, you didn't have cannabis consultants. So we built a system that was the system that we knew, right? It was the Legacy system, and it worked. It had a short supply chain. We had small growers. The distance between the grower and the consumer was really quick. We could make it happen really fast. There weren't a bunch of middlemen in there who didn't need it to be there, who didn't add value. And so that system grew from 2006 to 2018. Well, that ended, right? What we see now in California is, instead of a thriving, growing legal industry, the legal industry in California is the global poster child for how not to legalize cannabis. The only people in California that buy weed in legal dispensaries are the ones who are, so rich they don't care how much money they spend, or tourists who don't know how to access the Legacy market, or people who are so clueless they can't figure out how to buy weed from their next door neighbors on either side of them. Right? And then in Canada, there's another parallel statistic, right? In California, the legal market today only occupies 20% of the total market. There's a very other interesting statistic out of Canada, right? This is unbelievable. I couldn't believe it when I heard this, right? Put on your seatbelts, everybody. Since 2018, the licensed producers in Canada have only been able to sell 20% of the weed that they've grown, because the quality is so low that 80% of it has either had to be destroyed or is still being warehoused at a loss to investors of, drumroll, $11 billion. Now you tell me, in the Legacy marketplace, how many cycles did you fuck up? Not many, man. If you didn't get it right on the first turn or the second turn, you didn't have a room the third or fourth turn. So when I heard those figures, I was like, fucking amateurs.
No other way to put it,
It's the best. Wow, you getting it from the maestro, baby. That's incredible. Wow, that was a good one, Steve. Wow. Well, there's your snapshot on what's going on in Canada. Wow.
So then looking 5 years back and 5 years forward, what things have possibly gone right that may have nudged us in the right direction? Because we have seen so many of these state laws unveil with high hopes and high expectations and really fall flat, either with transitioning people out of the legacy market or really supporting, legacy growers and the people affected by prohibition negatively, and helping, really making a genuine effort to help them. So what things have gone right? What things are we going to need coming forward? And particularly from the feds, because federal legalization is going to come eventually. And what those laws look like are going to shape, what the states are allowed to do, how we're allowed to operate, and how this industry grows. So I'm just wondering what you guys' take is, or where you see things going right now.
I can just say, being right here in New York, and the recent legislation, which those that have studied what's going on coast to coast say is the most progressive, it's high hopes. There's, we're still waiting on the fine points of the regulation, but hopefully this could be a model, although it's still this, checkerboard of this state does it this way, that state does it like this. Of course, getting it right on the federal level, I think is important, but I think we're just really excited about what could happen in New York, and if they get it even partially right. And I'm sure Steve could speak to that, having been on the ground here and sees the possibilities. I'm optimistic about that.
Well, what's gone right is that we've seen cannabis become more legal in more places, and more people are consuming cannabis. Those are all really good things. Almost everything else in the process of legalization has gone wrong. And I think that we need to be clear about that. We need to take a look at what's happened during the course of the last 5 years and understand it's time for a complete reset. We need to listen to the plant. People roll their eyeballs at me when I talk about listening to the plant and talking to the plant. But if you listen carefully, you can hear her. And she's speaking very clearly. The statistics out of Canada say it, right? She's saying, don't put me in a 1,000,000 square foot grow room or even a 500,000 square foot grow room. Don't try to grow me with robots. I'm not going to thrive in that environment. I'm not going to reach my full potential. There's going to be a whole range of unanticipated problems that are going to arise from that. I do better when you put me next to human beings, when I have some human contact. Right? I think we need to go to a vision that's radically different. Imagine a cannabis industry where there was a 5,000 square foot canopy limit, period. Nobody, no matter what company or individual it is, can grow more than 5,000 square foot canopy of weed. Okay? But within that 5,000 square foot canopy of weed, you can do anything you want to it. You can make it into hash, you can make it into blunts, you can make it into teas, you can make it into edibles, do whatever you want. And you can sell it right from the farm gate, directly to the consumer, right? And you can do that either in a brick and mortar environment, like imagine a cannabis micro license village of 100 operators, how beautiful that would be. Or you can do it online. So imagine an Etsy for weed, right? I mean, Etsy exists now, right? Imagine if we had every grower was an artisan quality grower at a 5,000 square foot canopy. And imagine if every consumer could just jump online and access their favorite artisan grower. And imagine if they could place that order and that order could be fulfilled not through 3 distributors and 7 trucks and yin, right? It goes directly from the farm to the consumer by FedEx or USPS or any of the other existing delivery services that already exist, right? So the producer, the farmer, maximizes their margin because they're selling directly to the end consumer. The end consumer maximizes their value because they're buying directly from the farmer. It's basically the same structure we developed over 50 years in the legacy market. Who loses there? Everybody wins. Who loses? The parasites who screwed this whole thing up over the course of the last 5 years lose. Good riddance.
Yeah, 100%. And that, see, because understanding that the legacy model, necessarily had to be resilient because, to survive against, all of these forces, you didn't really have that much room for error. You can't, have your grow stinking. If your grow goes moldy, these things go wrong. And the capitalization of it, the mass capitalization of it has sort of removed us from that. So what are the ways in which, what are the other arguments? What are the ways in which we can really push this legacy to legal pipeline? What are the ways in which we can, succinctly make this argument? What are the other avenues about, supporting this radical change in model? Do we have, like, how can we continue to support the community and, be that, supported? I don't know what that looks like necessarily. I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth. I don't want to accidentally advocate for anything untoward. So please, like, what avenues do we have?
Well, there's so many avenues that are open to us, and Fred is working that avenue of culture and that avenue of brand building and that avenue of storytelling and bringing forth stories of folks like Bernard Noble. And that's a really important and critical part of it, right? Because we know that culture ultimately is what moves politics. Politics don't move culture. Culture moves politics. So at the end of the day, doing that culture work is really, really critically important to everything that we've ever accomplished. On the policy side, I think that the main thing that we need is a defined, explicit, named pathway for legacy operators to enter the legal market. Not line up with everybody who falls under the social equity category because you're actually social equity. No. Legacy operators have special, explicit needs. I'll give you one of them. Legacy operators, before they surface and say that they are who they are and talk about what their qualifications and what their professional life has been in order to get a license, need to make sure that the next president of the United States isn't going to prosecute them for doing those activities, right? So you have to make sure that if you're asking a legacy operator to surface, they get amnesty. That's a basic requirement. Well, that's not part of the conversation in regulations, even in the state of New York, where you've got regulators who are talking, making a nice game about legacy, who are talking about legacy. Where's the amnesty? Where's the amnesty? So that's one really important thing. The other thing is this. Amnesty operator or legacy operators shouldn't line up with everybody else in the race to get licenses, because it's legacy operators that built this market. We've already paid our dues. We've already been robbed. We've already had to worry about the cops. We've already looked at the market. We've already sold people on weed. We've already sold them. The legacy built the market, and it's here now, right? So it's not like there isn't plenty of weed being smoked in New York, right, and being sold in New York. There's two choices. You can either surface the existing market and legalize it, which is what we always had in mind, or you can try and bring a new corporate cannabis industry on top of the legacy market. And if you try that, good luck. Take a look at what's happened in California.
And back to that cultural element, we, especially looking at the documentary, you can see how important, these various iterations of, Black American culture, of Latin American culture, of indigenous culture, of really cultures around the world, being ambassadors for the plant, and really being at the forefront in some ways of the change in conversation, as a counter narrative towards government propaganda. So how, in what ways are we able to continue to sort of lead that conversation and make sure that as we see this corporatization, that we are really still pushing forward with everything? We're really still, dictating what the conversation is, socially, so that it can translate into that political power.
Yeah, well, like Steve said, storytelling is a big part of the narrative and the space that I've been based in, and there's so many more stories that need to be told to enlighten people on that legacy history. I got an opportunity to touch on a couple of great examples of that in Grass is Greener, specifically Branson, a Harlem legend who pretty much had created an incredible brand, had a good connection for some great California flower back in the 90s. And over 60 hip hop songs shouted him out for really going out of his way to consistently have a great product. And everybody from Method Man, Redman, Biggie, A to Z, on some great records, shouted him out. He's the quintessential legacy guy, similar to the origins of Burner and a few other people that have been able to navigate that space. And there's a lot of great storytelling there that I will be a part of. That's how we plan to expand what we're doing with the Be Noble brand right now. I'm also proud that we've been making a few dollars and we've been able to cut some checks, which is a part of the brand, is to give 10% of what we make to organizations that are helping heal the harm. So an organization in Massachusetts, Mass Cultivated, that's working with people formerly incarcerated, getting jobs in the cannabis space, and several other orgs that are helping people just get back on their feet. It's not a lot of money, but it means so much to just to be able to really, use the plant for messaging as well as helping. And so we look to do a lot more of that, as a lot more is needed. That's the storytelling that strengthens so much of what's happened, and so many people still need to be informed.
Yeah, that culture thread, I think it's worth mentioning for those who haven't seen the film, that culture thread played a really important role in American history. So one of the things that you see in Grass and Greener is part of the story of jazz and cannabis in the United States. And so, you have hip hop songs that are calling out folks like Branson, but you've got jazz songs from the 1920s that are calling out people like Mesro, who was
Exactly.
who sold weed underneath the Tree of Hope.
That's
up
right.
on the avenue in Harlem, where all the musicians would come and rub the Tree of Hope for good luck before they went and play their gig, and they pick up a little bit of weed from the Mighty Mez.
The Mighty Mez,
who was actually a white dude,
Yeah. And a pretty good clarinet player, and one of those like legacy stories, a guy that consistently had that great product and was definitely played a part in the culture.
Yeah.
The Mighty Mez.
Yeah. All right, so I think we're going to be on our way out. So one sort of last thing I wanted to touch on, just because I like to end on a positive note. We try to start somewhere positive, end somewhere positive. What applications or industries have you seen cannabis or hemp, starting to be applied to outside of the medicinal and adult use spaces that, you think it really has the power to be transformative, or that, people who are thinking about, what the next 5, 10, 15 years are might look like could get into now, so that, as technology evolves, they can be at the forefront?
Well, my most exciting one is something called graphene. Graphene is a semiconductor material. It's currently mined at great environmental and social costs out of the earth, often in conflict zones, often by very shady kinds of organizations at extremely high prices. But it's a critical component in renewable energy. And so the great news is, it turns out that you can make graphene out of hemp. And you can make it at a very small fraction of the price that it takes to mine regular graphene.
Wow.
So low that I'm in contact with a company that is looking at plans to skin houses and vehicles and boats and airplanes and buildings with hemp graphene, all of which would enable them to be photovoltaic collectors.
Wow.
Well, on that note, that is just so next level. But it makes me think, Steve, of how many uses in the plant, in hemp, going back centuries, and it just still keeps amazing with this unbelievable magic. And that's just, oh man, wow.
From jazz to semiconductors. Wow. One plant.
That's so next level, literally. But that's true.
Truly a gift, truly a gift. So as we wrap up, is there anything that you guys would like to promote or plug, just for the people, so that they know what to support, where to support, how to support, what's going on?
Well, I don't know. I think we've talked about it so much. I'm good with it all. I don't want to overstate the fact, but we hope to have Noble in the state of Florida pretty soon. Curaleaf has some stores down there, so we're working to get that flower at a fire level, and Florida, it'll be there in a minute, baby. Be Noble.
Yeah. You can, folks can stay in touch with me at steve.deangelo on Instagram, stevedeangelo.com. Always good to support the Last Prisoner Project. You can find them at lastprisonerproject.org. And of course, the Justice Foundation, this new nonprofit that we're standing up specifically to ensure that legacy operators do have a pathway to the legal market.
All right. Well, thank you guys both so much for your time. It's really a blessing to have you here and speaking with us. Again, my name is Menelik Washington from the Dope Connection, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks,
you,
Menelik.
Steve. Great seeing you guys. Good night, everybody.
Peace, y'all.
All right, man.